Bram, he said, well, how could he have seen me? Like, where was he that he could have seen me? And that would be the logical step of that guy was supposed to be at the wheel the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that if you're standing at the wheel, you wouldn't have been able to see me
chopping
this guy's head open.
Yeah.
Unless you weren't there. So where was he? What was he doing? Why did he see me? That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand,
it's entirely possible that Charlie Brown, for example, could have, if he really saw him, it could have been he maybe tied the wheel off just for a moment or two so he could go over the rail and urinate.
And then turned around and saw him.
And then turned around and saw what was going on in there.
But that makes it just as likely that Slice could have done it between the hours of 8 and 12. He could have killed the captain and the second mate because nobody else was around, and he lashed the wheel, and then later on decided he was going to finish off the captain's wife.
Maybe. I mean, his name is Slice after all. So, yeah. But anyway, Charlie Brown, you were saying he was kind of like simple, I think is the word that you're thinking.
That is one of the words that they would use to describe him.
Yeah. So even though his story really, frankly, doesn't add up for me at all, he might have just been trying to get himself out of trouble, or
And more than one case has been entirely based upon the story of a unfit individual. We've seen that on many, many cases.
Absolutely, yeah.
And again, it's hard to say what anybody's motive would have been. Bram, I don't know what his motive exactly would have been. Of course,
he apparently didn't like anybody on the crew.
Didn't seem to, or at least didn't like the captain, and didn't like the second mate. But there's lots of people I've known that I haven't liked. I didn't,
I haven't killed anyone yet.
Haven't murdered them.
That I will admit to.
So Charlie Brown, even less motive to kill somebody. So let's move to our next suspect, who is Lester Monks.
Yeah.
Because just what the hell was he doing there anyway?
I mean, really though.
Why? We know what he was doing there.
What?
His doctor told him that he needed to go on this voyage to get sea air.
Well, he said he needed to go on a voyage
because he was ill, but I mean, when they looked in his luggage was nothing but booze.
He did bring some booze with him.
60 bottles of beer, a bottle of, I think it was whiskey and gin or scotch. I mean, the guy was packing a boatload of booze, literally.
Actually, for a long sea journey, that's not a huge amount of alcohol.
But what I'm getting at is the fact that I have a suspicion that he had a drinking problem.
Might have.
And his doctor said, if you go on a sea voyage, you can dry out. You have nowhere to go. You can't get the booze. Mm-hmm. But he went about it in such a way that he's like, well, I'll just take my booze with me. I'll have it. I can just spread it over the journey. It'll be fine.
Yeah, but here's a question. Why this ship? Why not a ship that was made for passenger? Why not book passage on?
Because he spent all his money on beer.
Yeah, I think that if you get you can actually, and there's people today even who travel on freighters because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And you can actually travel all over the world on freighters. It can be done. I've actually considered it myself. I just haven't gotten around to doing it.
He chose this one.
He could have chosen any ship.
But even more than that, I don't know that necessarily his story 100% adds up. So
well, it doesn't, because I mean here's one of the things that's interesting to me is that he was in the passengers room, which is immediately after the captain's room where the captain's wife was murdered.
It's between where the captain was murdered and the captain's wife was murdered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so he's awakened by a scream. He's a little disoriented, so he sits up, and then he hears a second scream. So he exits the room with his revolver and into the main cabin, turns left towards the chart room where the captain was. But if he heard the captain's wife screaming in her stateroom, that's just on the other side of the bulkhead from his cabin. It's about the direction the scream was coming from. Why did he turn left towards where the captain was and not right towards where the captain's wife was?
If he'd had a couple of drinks, his sense of direction might have been a little fouled up.
But that's something that puzzles me quite a bit. And another,
I mean, if he wanted to go to the chart room, is that what you're calling it, Joe? Is that correct? If he wanted to go to the chart room, why didn't he just go out the door of his room that led directly into the chart room instead of going into the main
Well, it
cabin.
could have been bolted.
Well, it could have been. I mean, there might actually be there, and there is another door there. Yeah, it's true. The way the story was, that I read about it, might have been actually confusingly worded, and maybe he did exit directly into the chart room and not
Or
through the main
maybe
cabin.
it was bolted.
Or
Yeah.
it could have been bolted too.
I don't know that if you were the captain and you had a chart room that opened directly into a passenger's room, I don't know that you would necessarily want a door direct.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know as a passenger you would just want the captain to be able to walk into your room like whenever.
Yeah, so it's like those extra doors in hotel rooms.
It is
and
exactly like that.
Interconnect them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're usually locked.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, locked solid. But it's still, no matter how many doors there were there, I still have to wonder why he went the opposite direction from where the screams were coming.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. And the
Well-
next thing I wonder about.
It's
Well-
weird acoustics, possibly.
No, the other thing I'll say is that it is never, as far as I know, maybe you guys do know, I didn't see it specified that it was a woman screaming. I thought he just heard screaming. And dudes scream too when they're getting hacked to crap.
Oh, for sure, but still.
No, we don't. We're
so-
manly.
Yeah.
So it's possible to me that he did go in the direction.
And
Of
it
the
was the
scream.
captain
Yeah.
screaming. Yeah.
That would actually make sense in
'Cause
terms
he was
of
still dying.
the captain was still dying, yet the wife had obviously already expired.
Yeah.
But the next thing of the story that makes no sense to me is that he finds the captain gurgling and dying in the darkness, and the first thing he does is goes to find his wife to help. Now, it's a puzzle to me why he would do that as opposed to going to find the first mate or the second mate.
He's a passenger. He may have no idea what anybody's schedule is on the ship.
He's been on the boat for like 10 days now. He should know pretty clearly.
You are assuming that
And
he's
by
an
the way-
observant individual.
That's true too, but also schedules don't matter. When you found somebody who's been murdered, we can wake people up.
Well, no, what I mean is he may not have known if they were in their cabins or if they were about their duties, and he knows that the captain's wife will be in her room because she wasn't in the room
But
where the
what's-
captain was.
Addition.
But what's the point of getting the captain's wife? You want to get somebody in authority. You don't want to get
Why?
the captain's wife.
Well,
You wanna
frankly,
yeah.
the captain's wife has authority over the captain, right? He may have thought that she would have been able to help the most because she may have had some sort of training. They may have talked about she may have, served as a nurse or something like that at one point. Who knows, right? Also, young men often seek out mother figures in situations like this, right? They're like, oh my God, I got to find mom because she's going to know what to do. And fourthly, her room is the closest.
It is pretty close,
It's
yeah.
the first door you come to other than his own room.
But it still makes no sense to me. But here's the next thing about his story that makes no sense to me. And that is he heads aft. He heads in a passageway aft, and then he comes to a ladder that takes him up to the deck where he meets Bram. Correct?
Right.
Well, that passageway takes him right past the first mate's and second mate's cabins, and he did not actually stop and knock on either one of their doors. And it turns out that when he passed the second mate's room, cabin, by the way, that door was actually ajar. It wasn't wide open, but it was ajar. And he just walked right past it.
Panic. That's the only thing I could attribute that to is panic.
All I can say is there's the other things about monks that are a little disturbing to me is that a lot of the incriminating information that we found and heard about Brahms in his
Came from
trial
monks.
came from monks.
Yeah, I actually, despite my argument against you, I think monks did it.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible that Monks was actually like a very clever little psychotic serial killer type who just thought, let's see if I can just, sign onto a ship, murder some people, and pin it on somebody else.
Then write a book about it.
And let's just see how good I am.
Yeah,
let's
or-
see if I can not just get away with it, but see somebody else hang for it.
Or he was just like an awful drunk.
Yeah.
Well, but it would explain the question you asked earlier, which is how would anybody have had time to change and clean up?
He would have had time.
He would have had tons of time.
He totally would have been the guy.
Because
yeah.
also, right, he was the only one who heard the screams.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
No.
supposedly
What's his name?
Charlie
Charlie
Brown.
Brown said
Charlie
he
Brown claims it, but then Charlie Brown.
No, but Charlie Brown only said he heard screams after.
long
Didn't- wasn't
after.
it?
Yeah, he didn't.
When he was under duress.
So whether Charlie actually heard a scream or not, I don't know. And so there might not have been a scream.
So he was the only one who heard the scream. So
Yeah, and
I
I think
he did it.
Definitely. I mean, if you look at say Bram, like you said, maybe could have done it. It would have had to have been really well planned and some good preparations ahead of time. But like you say, I mean, Monk's had all the time in the world. He really could have done it. So yeah, Monks. He's one of my friends.
I think he did it.
Yeah, let me toss out another one though, which is that everybody did it because you guys have all read Murder on the Orient Express, right? And where it turns out that everybody had a motive to kill the guy, and they all participated. And so maybe that's what it was.
That's a lot of motives for three
It was
people.
a true mutiny.
Yeah.
It could have been.
Well, it could have been that the wife was just collateral damage, and so was the second mate.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
Although again, like why they were all three in separate rooms, but okay.
Yeah, I know.
But sure, I'll go with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you rush the chain of command is what you do. You rush the captain, you rush his wife, and because the first mate is in on it, you rush the second mate who has said, I would not, let's just presume he said, I wouldn't take part in that. You're crazy. So you decimate the chain of command and you can insert yourself in there.
Yeah.
But at that point, why didn't they just go rogue instead of going home? Why didn't they continue with the journey or become pirates or something, Like that's the problem with this theory is that they did it and then they chickened out.
That could have they could have concocted some sort of a story like there was an outbreak of influenza, the captain and his wife both died. Yeah, axe fever. Yeah. So they could have. I mean, people died on long voyages back in those days. They got swept overboard and drowned, or they got sick and died. I mean, all kinds of things could happen.
And if they really were doing that, then they just had to bury them at sea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the whole thing went away.
Just toss them all overboard, and then if everybody's story is the exact same, no problem.
Yeah, pretty much.
Charlie Brown was such an idiot, he kept screwing up the story.
Yeah.
Then they knew they were sunk.
Yeah.
Damn Charlie Brown, anyway. But I tend to. I love conspiracies, but I don't usually believe in them because usually somebody's stupid and somebody talks.
Yeah, I think Monks did it.
I have an off-the-wall fun theory.
Yeah, what's that?
It was Time Traveler.
It could have been.
Because it turns out this load of wood was going to create what would eventually become the Nazi compound in Argentina in the 40s for hiding Nazis. And by
that could have
not
been.
doing that, it didn't allow them somewhere to go, so then they were eventually found and sent to Nuremberg.
Got it.
Yeah, that could have been it. Or it could have been, I'm thinking the Illuminati because the whole thing is actually just a way to get Bram killed. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to get their hands dirty by killing him. They wanted him to be strung up by the state. So instead they murdered 3 other people and framed him for it.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah.
Make him a martyr. It could be they were trying to make him a martyr.
Yeah.
Because wasn't there... Wait. There was stuff about Bram saying he was a Mason and saying things that were supposedly... Mason code of I'm in distress. I'm the son of a mother who has already passed away. Or it was some phrase was recorded that was a coded message from one person to the other that I need help.
Well, that's why Woodrow Wilson pardoned him too, because he was also a Mason, right?
That could have been it. I don't know. Was Wilson a Mason?
I don't know. Wildly
Weren't they all?
accusations.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of them were.
Yeah.
Wilson was a fun guy.
Yeah.
He was also probably an elk.
Yeah, really.
So I don't know.
And a Shriner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other theories?
There's the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, I don't think that.
Yeah, it sort of like exercised his mojo on somebody and made him like murder these 3 people.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's of course the Kraken and Chupi. We haven't blamed anything on Chupi for a while.
No, that's true.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Chupi. I don't think Chupi does so well in open water.
No, Chupi's not really Chupi's thing.
Chupi's got seasickness.
Yeah, good point.
And there's no goats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is going to remain a kind of a mystery, I think. But I think I agree with Devin and maybe Steve about Monks. I think it was probably him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's
But I wouldn't.
It's also entirely possible that it was one of the other regular seamen.
Oh yeah.
Who we never talked about, who had some axe to grind, no pun intended,
Yeah.
and did a good enough job that nobody saw him and had plenty of time to clean up. Because remember that Bram and Monk sat on deck until the sun rose, which was hours. So that would give that person, whoever that unnamed person is, plenty of time to change the clothes and wash up and hide away their bloody gear. Completely possible.
Yeah, it could have been. It could have been one of these things too, where somebody in the crew bribed the second mate to kill the captain and his wife.
And then killed the second
And then
mate.
killed the second mate rather than pay him.
Yeah.
It could have been that, you know.
True.
There's all sorts of possibilities.
That would
there.
explain-
We
that
could
would hide a lot of
conjecture
blood.
forever.
Oh, yeah, we could.
Yeah,
Well, that's what we do.
yeah it's true. Irresponsible conjecture.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
We
So,
should make that a tagline somewhere.
Yeah.
I think we will probably, but more on that later. Okay, time for a little housekeeping before we go. First off, you're probably wondering how to get a hold of us, especially you want to send me fan mail. Of course you do. Yeah. Our email is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can send it by steamship.
Yeah, that too. Or Morse. There's always Morse. We have a website, thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. Where you can find our episodes, you can download them and listen to them, and we've got links to find merch, all kinds of fun stuff like T-shirts and mugs and stickers. You can also find us on iTunes, where you can subscribe, you can rate us, give us a review, hopefully a good review and a high rating, and and downvote all the 1-star ratings, would you please? Yeah, and you can stream us. There's Stitcher and there's
Google Play.
There's Podbean, which I hear is popular these days.
Yeah, there's a bajillion of them.
Yeah. So you can find us somewhere out there, and social media. We're on Facebook, of course.
Yeah.
We have a group. We have a page. So you join the group and like the page. Mm-hmm. And don't try to friend us. It's not a friend thing. Join the group. Also
We're not your friends.
Yeah,
Just
well, we
kidding,
are
we're
your friends.
We don't
Yeah.
want friends.
We're not Facebook friends.
We're not good
Different
friends.
story. Yeah. Twitter, Thinking Sideways without the G, and of course we have a subreddit, Thinking Sideways, where there's all kinds of hot action. Devin, what's going on the subreddit?
Nothing.
Okay, there you go. Get out there right now. You're missing out. That's all right. Well, that's it for next week. So I can't think of anything maritime. So goodbye.
We should probably just chop this one off right here.
Okay.
I was gonna do my schooner thing, but that's okay.
You already did that.
It's a schooner.
Too sooner.
You boat. A sailboat is a schooner.
So,
You know what?
you guys are.
The Easter Bunny isn't real.
I am totally at
That
sea.
guy over there is just a guy in a suit.
Okay. With that.
Joe's confused. We gotta
goodbye.
go.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hello there. Welcome again to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I'm Joe, joined as always by
Steve?
and
Devin?
yeah. So okay, we're gonna jump into another unsolved mystery. This week.
We cover Unsolved Mysteries?
Yeah,
I thought this was a cooking show.
Yeah, no. That's
Amnesia.
That's our other
Tonight
Thinking Sideways.
on Thinking Sideways, the podcast, we discover why Steve can't remember anything from his life.
I was dropped on my head a lot as a baby.
For me, it's just the booze and lack of sleep. But,
What are we talking
Yeah.
about today?
today we are going to talk about the mysterious death of Netta Fornario. So you're looking at a picture of her right here. This is what you see on most of the web pages that deal with this little mystery. Except that's not actually a picture of her. That's a picture of somebody named Moina Mathers, who figures kind of in this story a little bit.
But it's not Netta.
It's not Netta, no. No, it's Moina.
Do we have a picture of Netta?
No, I've not been able. I thought that was Netta for the longest time
I
until
did
I started
too.
checking it out. But no, it turns out that's Moina Mathers.
Okay, so we're talking about Netta, but not Moina, but
Yeah,
Moina
yeah.
will come up later?
I just wanted to let people know that if you go check this out on the web and you see this picture of this kind of good-looking woman with kind of wild
She
woolly
looks
hair.
Serbian.
She looks crazy.
She's got a bird's nest hairdo.
Yeah. But
Well, that
she's,
was typical of the time,
Yeah,
but, you
she's
know.
still
It was
kind of.
stylish.
It was.
She's still, kind of good looking, but
Despite the hair.
yeah, despite the crazy hair. Well, so anyway, let's talk about Netta. Okay, so just a quick, brief intro summary here. In late summer 1929, Netta Fornario, 33 years old, resident of London, England, left London and traveled to the island of Iona. And I'm probably mispronouncing that. I think it's Iona. Might be Iona.
I think it's Iona.
I think it's Iona. Iona is in the Scottish Hebrides. It's anyway, it's one of those little bitty tiny islands out there that's got a quaint little village in it and not much else.
Yep.
So anyway,
Bagpipes.
lots of that.
Yep.
She was planning an extended stay there. In late November, the same year, she went missing. After a 2-day search, her naked body was discovered on top of a, quote, fairy mound, unquote, because I'll talk about this a little later, but everybody believed that this island was like full of ghosts and fairies and stuff like that.
Well, it
So-
was the 20s in,
Yeah.
Scotland.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before.
We
Oh
have.
yeah. She or somebody, most likely her, had cut a large cross in the turf using a dagger, which was found near her body, and laid down on the dagger. She was not technically completely naked. She had a very thin black cloak on her, but that was it. This is late November in the Scottish Hebrides, so obviously it must have been really cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some accounts say that she was clutching some papers in one of her hands, letters of a mysterious nature. But other accounts say that those letters were found in her luggage back in her room. She was staying with this lady named Mrs. McRae. Some say that blue lights were seen in the vicinity of her body, but of course, there's more often than not, there's blue lights in these mysteries. So,
Always.
yeah, I know.
Black
and,
lights.
And a strange man was supposedly lurking nearby, wearing a black cloak.
Sure.
Yeah,
Stalker.
yeah, I know.
Well, they were twins,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, maybe he was wearing her black cloak. Anyway, back to the start. So why did you go to Iona? Iona is a very tiny island. It's about a mile wide, about 4 miles long. You get to it by taking a ferry from the Isle of Mull, which is to the east of it. You get to the Isle of Mull by taking a ferry to there. So
Not an easy place to
Not
get
an easy
to.
thing. I assume for this little journey, she probably had to take like a long train ride and maybe then a couple of ferry rides at the very least.
It was
From
like 3
London?
days.
yeah.
From London, it would have been,
It would have been
from London to the coast, right?
Yeah.
And then a ferry,
Yeah.
and then likely another train.
across
and
the
then-
island, or
yeah.
a bus or a car or
Yeah.
something.
And then another ferry, and then so 3
Yeah.
ferries
Well,
and
it's
2
29.
trains.
There's probably not a whole lot of car traffic. Probably most of the commuting is done via train.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that just doesn't sound like a quick and easy afternoon jaunt.
No, not some place you go for just the weekend.
Or you just happen to be at,
Yeah,
right?
if you just happen to live in the Isle of Mull, then it's a quick, easy, happy jaunt
Sure,
to
but
Iona.
from London.
London, it's a ways. Anyway, the population at the latest census count of Iona is 177 people. I assume it was fewer people back in those days.
Wow.
The only town is called, and again, I'm sorry for the mispronunciation, but it's called Balemore. But the locals call it the Village. And, yeah.
Oh,
The village.
the village.
Yeah, the island is also home to the bay at the back of the ocean, which is an oddly named bay. For such a backwater, Iona has got a really interesting history. The earliest structure found on the island was constructed, they guess, about 100 years previous to Christ, and it was what they call an Iron Age hilltop fort, which was probably something that mainly was like earthen ramparts kind of thing.
Yeah, just mounds.
Probably not as serious, but so it's been inhabited for a long time. But in 563 A.D., a monk named Columba, who later became Saint Columba, founded a monastery there. He had been exiled to the island for various reasons that I don't really need to get into. But if you want to hear more about it, I can point you towards some links. But anyway, so he and about a dozen other monks founded this monastery, and this monastery, as it turned out, would play a crucial role in converting most of the UK to Christianity. And the island became a center of a very important monastic system. And it was also a major center of learning, and it's believed, although nobody knows for sure, that the Book of Kells was created there. Or maybe at least part of it was created there. But they're not sure if the Book of Kells was actually created in just one place or in a number of places and then assembled. They're not really
Refresh
sure.
my memory. What is the Book of Kells again?
The Book of Kells is a very, very heavily illuminated a series of the Gospels. It's not all of the New Testament, but some of it, and they're very elaborately illustrated.
Okay. And it came out of this region.
Yeah, and so they're not sure if it came out purely out of Iona or not out of Iona or just some pages of it came out of this place. They don't really know for sure.
So it's a very well-known historic Scottish book of the Bible.
Or
illuminated version.
Do we need to tell people what illuminated means?
And so if you don't know what illuminated text is, it just means that it's done very elaborately, like embroidered and illustrated.
You see a lot in like Italian kind of, or like, actually Italian Catholic stuff, right? It's the like gold filigree with like drawings along the sides and like with the huge starting letters.
And giant drop caps are what they're called. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think these are the kind of books where it would take, I'm making up a number, but let's just say 5 monks a month to make all of the illustrations for one page.
At least, and often they were actually gold leafed and all of that.
And you had to paint the gold on. Oh, yeah. No, and if you don't know what one of those are, I mean, if you just haven't seen one before, you need to check them out.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. To think that somebody sat there with an ink pen and a brush to paint all that color so painstakingly, and then to brush on liquid gold.
Yeah.
That's the amazing part.
Iona was also a great place to be. For a while, it was the place to be if you were royalty and you were dead. You were looking for a place to be buried. Apparently, as of the year 1549, there were 60 kings buried on the island there because...
Were they buried or interred?
They were interred, and actually interred can mean either being buried or being put in a crypt or mausoleum.
Often royalty, I don't know. It's my impression that often royalty is actually like interred in a mausoleum or
sometimes they would do the burial mound where they would erect, they'd put everything in, they'd give you a little stone structure, and then they would cover that in the big burial mound. So I think that's why it's kind of a gray area.
Sure. I think in this case they were buried in the soil though, because the reason that they were buried there is there was a belief that the soil of the island was holy and that it would remove your sins and cleanse you so that you could enter heaven more cleanly.
Really?
Interesting.
And if you're royalty and you spent your entire life scheming and murdering your opponents in your competition, then you probably want a little soul cleansing before you enter heaven. But anyway, there were 48 Scottish kings, 8 Norwegian kings, and 4 Irish kings buried there as of the year 1549. And it's even mentioned in Shakespeare's Macbeth.
You mean the Scottish tragedy?
Well, yes. So anyway, there's a reference to it in there, and it's... the reference is about Duncan's body. He's carried to Columkill, and Columkill means Columbus Island, which is another word for Iona. Carried to Columkill, the sacred storehouse of his predecessors and guardian of their bones.
Oh.
So Iona really, it was a happening spot if it made it in Shakespeare.
For such an itty-bitty island, that's really surprising.
Yeah. And so I'm going into all this travelogue thing because just as a...
kind of Rick Steves.
It's kind of fun. And besides which, it maybe explains her motivation, because exactly why would a person like that be motivated to go live on this island? Iona is also supposedly inhabited by ghosts, fairies, sea fairies, and all kinds of stuff like this. It's got a long list of legends about this place. So Netta would have found that attractive because she was into the occult, into astral projection and stuff like that. She was a member of Alpha A Omega, which was an offshoot of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is another cult group.
And I don't know about at that time, but I know that like modernly, Shakespeare's Scottish tragedy is pretty well read and regarded in terms of kind of occult ghost story stuff. I can see how it would be a draw for her as an occult member. For any occult member, really. I mean, if they were read in that sort of Shakespeare lore situation, or I guess any lore, it seems.
Yeah, these guys were, they weren't just into Shakespeare. They had all sorts of magical beliefs.
Right.
There were these things called the secret chiefs, which were like these cosmic beings that they believed that they had a direct phone line to.
Cosmic chiefs?
Yeah, they're called the secret chiefs, I think. And so these were cosmological beings that controlled a lot of the chaos of the universe, and they could be communicated to, according to the leaders of these cults, that they could communicate with these people. So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was into astral projections and all kinds of stuff. I had no reason to believe that they were into any of the really ugly stuff, like human sacrifice and animal sacrifice and all that stuff. I don't think they were.
No dead goats or anything.
Well, now, and maybe I'm thinking of the wrong group, but I remember there was something that I read about one of the guys that was a founder had asked for somebody to be buried alive in front of some building that they had.
That was no, I believe that was St. Columba.
Was that Columba?
When he started,
Okay.
when he built his monastery. Yeah, he
I
had
wasn't
nothing
sure
to
if
do
I
with
was
the
getting it
Golden Dawn.
confused.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
because I remember there was something about somebody needs to be buried alive in front of this building. I'll do it.
Yeah, it was his friend volunteered.
And then they uncover his face so that he can say goodbye to everybody. And he's obviously having second thoughts, and he freaked out. And
Quick,
they
cover him
got
up
upset
again.
and covered him up again. It was really weird. But
Yeah.
okay, I'm
Catholicism
honestly
is a
wrong group.
weird sect of Christianity, and we'll
Yeah.
just leave it at that.
Yeah.
and continue on.
People back in those days, I mean, I guess life was a little cheaper back in those days, and you didn't really expect this guy. Figured, hey, what the hell? If I go out on a high note like this, I'm going to be sure to get to heaven. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was founded by Samuel Mathers in 1888. The group attracted a fair followership in the early 1900s. So there was a bit of a sex scandal, and so he lost some of his temples, but the ones that remained loyal to him, he renamed the Alpha A Omega, or in other words, Alpha and Omega. And then after he died in 1918, he was succeeded in the leadership role by his widow, Moina Mathers. Moina Mathers is the one I showed you the picture of.
Yeah,
That
okay.
makes so much
The
sense.
one who appears on, so Netta was a member of this particular sect or cult or whatever you
But
want to
she
call
was
them.
just a member, right?
Yeah, she
Okay.
wasn't, as far as I know, in any kind of leadership
Okay,
role.
great.
Moina eventually succeeded in expelling someone named Dion Fortune from the order. Dion Fortune was a woman who actually was friends with Netta Fornario, but she published some of the cult's secrets. I believe it was in about 1922. She actually published some of those, and also it was rumored that Moina was jealous because her abilities to do things like astral projection and stuff like that were superior to Moina's, and so she just didn't really like her, and so she succeeded in getting her expelled from the order. And Dion went on and joined some other cult, and did pretty well with them, and remained friends with Netta Fornario. Anyway, I'll talk about Moina and Dion later. So back to Netta. I haven't talked about Netta much at all so far.
No.
No,
Yeah, I
really.
know.
We talked about her for about a minute and a half, and
I know.
then we left her behind.
Then we're giving a travelogue and a history of this Alpha and Omega. And
It's all backstory. It's very important stuff.
yeah, it
really does
It plays
make
a
more
role.
sense with this.
Yeah. Her full name was Nora Emily Editha Fornario. Her nickname was Netta. And I don't know, Nora's nice. I don't know about all four names. So she headed to the island, and she, upon landing, found lodging with a lady called Mrs. McRae. And I've not been able to definitively establish what Mrs. McRae's full name is, but that's okay. We don't need to know. She was Mrs. McRae, I assume a kindly old lady. Apparently they became friends. Netta spent her days wandering around the island and spent her nights doing supernatural stuff, like trances, astral projection, stuff like that.
So she probably
As you would.
spent some of her days sleeping.
Probably did a little sleeping too. She also believed that she could heal people with her psychic powers.
Sure.
And she sent a letter to her housekeeper in London, so she still had her digs back in London. And she'd been in communication, but in this letter she said she wouldn't be sending any letters for a while because she, quote, had a terrible case of healing, unquote, to work on.
What?
So nobody knows what that means. It's a little mysterious. But she apparently was either healing herself or healing somebody else. And
Terrible
like so-
case of healing.
That's a
Yeah.
weird phrase.
That's a very odd phrase.
Yeah, it is an odd phrase. I think Netta was an odd person. I think...
I generally feel, though, that I can get into the minds of people in this kind of, new agey. I've been there, right? Like, we've all kind of had that phase where we go through and we're like, astral projection and auras and tarot cards and all that stuff. I don't know if you guys did. I went through that phase.
I didn't take
And
it too
so-
seriously. I read what's his name, Don Juan.
Yeah. With
what's the
the
guy's name? The guy who wrote these books about how he went out to this guy's cabin.
Don Juan de Muerto.
Yeah, and he was like Carlos Castaneda.
Yeah.
Carlos Castaneda, who it turns out, by the way, I was going to do a little bit about Carlos Castaneda because he's an interesting guy in and of himself because he was the guy I really